Hello, my name is Marianne, and this is Finnegan, my boy, and welcome to my booktube channel. I know it's been a while since I did one of these videos. That's what happens when you take off at the holidays and then decide to just take off a little more time, and pretty soon it's the middle of February and you haven't done a video in a bit. But what I have done in all that time is I have read. So there are books to talk about. I don't know that I'll cover everything I've read in January. I actually know I won't because I have volunteered to be a judge for the BookTube Prize. And the BookTube Prize judges are not supposed to talk about the books until after, they get past judging. So there is a selection of books that I'm reading right now that I can't speak about right now. I will say I am enjoying the process of being a judge. I'm liking the books. One of the things I always like about book prizes and the lists that they do is that even before volunteering to be a judge, I would always look at the lists and just try to read all those books just to see, because a lot of times what gets put on those lists isn't necessarily something you might have picked up. You'll find things there that you might not have found otherwise. I am really enjoying being a BookTube Prize judge. I'm enjoying the books that I've been reading, but unfortunately, like I say, you can't speak about them until after a certain point in time when it's acceptable. So we don't influence each other in what we're voting for and what we're judging as best. So there are a few other books, though, that I can speak about that I have read in January. The first book that I want to tell everyone about is Meat by Dane Cobain. Meat is Dane's newest release. It came out near the end in the autumn of last year, 2020. It's a horror novel set in a fictional mega-sized factory farm. There's an outbreak of a virus on the factory farm that does some very interesting things to the farm animals and the people. It's a story that's definitely a horror with a lot of action. It does not hold back on the gore. What happens on that farm is pretty graphic. I will say the book does not hold back. The main horror plot, I want to say the force of it being a horror novel is, of course, there's an outbreak of a virus on the farm, which leads to some pretty interesting problems with the animals and, of course, with the people as well. But there's a lot in the book. There's a lot in the book that's great if you love a good horror. There's a lot in the book that I found too that was about animal rights, and it made sense knowing that Dane is a vegan. There are definitely things in there about the factory farm industry, at least. Not necessarily the small farmers, but the factory farm industry where they do large-scale farming of meats and animal products that were a bit... it certainly makes you want to check the labels on your food and make sure everything is ethically sourced, and maybe even look to a few vegetarian or even vegan options when you read some of the things that happen in the book. It is full of action and it is full of horror and gore, so it's just one of those books that it was really fun. It was a fairly fast-paced read, even though it was about 400 pages. It was a book that once you got into it, just really flowed, and you just wanted to know who was going to get out of this alive, what was going to happen, what was the end result of this whole disaster going to be. So I definitely recommend it. I have read many of his other books, many of Dane Cobain's other books in the past, and I definitely recommend his writing overall. There is another one of his books actually coming out in audio sometime soon. His book Driven will be made into an audiobook. I don't know exactly when. I just heard word that it's going to be made into an audio, so that's something to keep an eye out, or maybe an ear open for in the future. Now, I did read another book in January that dealt heavily with animal rights as well, and that was Drive Your Plow Over the Bones of the Dead by Olga Tokarczuk. It is set in Poland. It is a mystery book, which I was surprised because when I went into this book, it's all over the cover, of course, award-winning novel. I believe it won the Nobel Prize for Literature. But when I read it, to me, it read very much like a cozy mystery. So there was that sense of, well, this is just a comfy sort of read. Comfy in the sense of if you call it mystery, comfy and cozy. There is, of course, murder in it. In the novel, the narrative voice is, of course, an older woman who lives in a sort of secluded area on the borders between Poland and Czechoslovakia. And so she's sort of out there living on her own, keeping to herself, taking care of these cottages that are out there. And you sort of follow the story through her eyes. And as you read it, not only do you find that it's a cozy mystery, which was actually a very pleasant surprise, but that's also where I found a lot of the animal rights coming up, because there was this whole theme in the book of there being hunters in the area who were doing a hunt, and the conflict that this woman has with the hunters. And the book goes in some places you might not necessarily think it's going to go. But it is a very good book. I did like, as I say, the narrative voice. I liked the story being told through that character. It was sort of like listening to somebody just tell you a story, the way it was written. It was basically the story through her eyes. It all begins when she discovers the body of a neighbor who's been murdered in his home. Her and another neighbor find this body, and dealing with what happens after that. And I mean, the story takes you in some interesting directions. It isn't what you expect it's going to be by the time you get done. I never like to give too much of a plot away because I don't want to spoil stories, particularly mysteries or things where that's really the whole thing. You're trying to figure this out. And if somebody told you already at the beginning how it's going to end, it's not going to be interesting. So what I will say is it doesn't end up where you think it's going to end up or how you think it's going to end up. At least it didn't end up where I thought it was going. There was a bit of a twist at the end. I sort of saw it coming, but not till the very end. I very highly recommend it. Of course, these two books weren't the only things I read in January. As I said, I was reading for the BookTube Prize, and I did read a few other little things here and there in the background. But those two were definite standouts from January, and they definitely had that connection in my head that made them into a kind of cohesive theme. So it has been a while. I know this is probably one of my more awkward videos again. I'm probably back to step one, but I hope it isn't too bad. I hope you enjoyed it anyway. And I am going to continue to do these and hopefully get back to some amount of competence at it again. So I will see you in the next one.